For the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, but for that purpose, we've had a recommendation from one of our board members to the consent agenda items D, E, and F have been asked to be moved to new business. And with that, if I can have, with that move, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion for the approval of the minutes from April 5th of 2017?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, statement of chair. Come back, they can't hear me. So I wanted to give the board an update for Senate Bill 567, a couple of big things that are happening. I just want to let you know where we are. Senate Bill 567 was signed by the governor at the end of April. It makes Gary School Corporation, it designates them as a distressed political subdivision. There is currently an RFI that is out there. It is due by May 10th. We are expecting comprehensive reform in the district. That is the goal. The emergency manager that will come in will be empowered to make that structural change. We understand, and we have talked to Gary. We appreciate the magnitude of what the situation is and the sensitivity around that, but the department is committed to assisting. We've been at the table since day one, and we will continue to do so. For Muncie Community Schools, they are designated a little bit differently. Their designation is as a fiscal impaired school corporation. That designation will expire at the end or the beginning of January of 18. The emergency manager, which may or may not be the superintendent, that is up for decision by the DUAB still at this point, but is expected to take action to address some of their concerns. So both districts are obviously experiencing some financial hardships, but again, just so this board knows, the department will be assisting with whatever support, guidance, tools that they may need and ask for. The other piece of this that I want to make the board aware of is as of June of 15, the Higher Learning Commission Board adopted new guidelines that you're well aware of regarding dual credit. And I know this is an area, especially Dr. Yeager, you have your eyes on this. So by September of 2022, those teachers will have to have a master's in their content or at least those 18 graduate credit hours. So you know what the department is doing to try to address that, because a significant number of Indiana teachers and schools will be impacted. Our charge at this point is try to find solutions. So we can talk about it forever, but we're trying to move that into a solution area. So in order to assist, we have issued an RFI that we're trying to determine the best way to implement a plan that may look traditional or non-traditional in order to assist those teachers and those schools in getting the coursework they need without hardships on the teacher, without hardships necessarily on the school or on the district. And so we do have an RFI that is out. We are looking at how to utilize, knowing there could be a cut in some of our title monies, our federal monies, but how to utilize those monies that are set aside at the state level for that purpose. So that is high on our radar. We've been across the state. I was in Fort Wayne yesterday, and they were very concerned, and it is going to be a hardship not only for our schools, but for our students and definitely for our families with those finances. So that is on our radar, and I just wanted to give the board an update on where we were with those two items. So with that, we will move into board comments and reports. Gordon.
First off, hopefully our staff is working on maybe getting a microphone that we can pass around so everyone can hear us. Okay, so we're working on that. So hopefully we're going to address that for...
Okay, it's working.
Okay, fantastic. First off, thank you to the University of Evansville for hosting us today. We were very pleased to tour a number of Evansville School Corporation schools yesterday. I think it's important for us to get out in the schools that we're working with to help improve, and please do visit fellow board member B.J. Watts' Vogel Elementary School. So that was a pleasure. Thank you for hosting us there, B.J. And would also like to thank, I thank the University of Evansville for hosting us today. So appreciated your presentation. I wanted to comment, we talked a little bit about legislation. I just wanted to comment on as a wrap-up of the legislative session of 2017 and highlight several important pieces of legislation that were signed into law that will impact education in the state of Indiana. I think first and foremost, and this board recommended this last fall, but the legislature and the governor worked to expand the existing pre-K program here in the state of Indiana. And I think this was incredibly important, and it shows a commitment to improving education in our state. The program was expanded from 5 counties to 20 counties in Indiana, and the annual funding was increased by $10 million per year to $22 million on an annual basis, funding pre-K for kids in the state of Indiana. The program, some have said, will, which is currently serving 2,300 kids in the state, could potentially quadruple. And what we're talking about, folks, is access to high-quality pre-K programs. And all the evidence out there shows that getting kids into quality pre-K programming gives them a boost and a head start into kindergarten and beyond. It sets the foundation for better learning and success in our schools. So I want to just take this opportunity to applaud all of those folks who worked hard on getting this through the legislature and signed by the governor. That includes the legislature, the speaker, and the president of the Senate, the governor, Governor Holcomb, superintendent, and this board for advocating, and many, many others for advocating for expanding the pre-K program. I'd also like to applaud all those who worked on the legislation that the superintendent mentioned relating to the Gary and Muncie school systems. Those school districts have experienced significant problems over the years that have come before this board, and I think this was the right step for the legislature to take immediate action and do whatever is possible to help those 2 school districts. I think that's in the best interests of the kids, and that's what this is all about. Lastly, I'd like to say that the legislature took action to replace the I-STEP test, which we've seen has had some issues over the years, and they're going to replace it with a test called iLearn, and we hope, and I might add that the State Board of Education has been delegated a significant amount of authority to make some decisions going forward on what the iLearn test looks like. And so I would just commit to those in the public that this board will work hard to ensure that we improve testing in the state of Indiana, hopefully reduce the amount of hours that are allocated to testing. Testing is very important, but we also have to be judicious about the amount of hours that are being spent on learning as opposed to testing. And then I would like to add that we are also going to be focused on trying to reduce the expense of creating and administering these tests here in the state. People don't realize how costly the tests are, literally tens of millions of dollars. And I think our goal here, one of our goals, will be to try to reduce the expense to the state of Indiana and you, the taxpayers, in finding a better way to evaluate the learning of our kids in our state, hopefully save taxpayers some dollars at the same time. So again, honored to be here in Evansville, and thank you all. I see we have a great audience out here, and I know a number of you will be speaking to us, and we look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Any other board member? Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm sorry, Dr. Yeager.
Sorry. Wanted to talk just a little bit about the vote a month ago with Lakeland Christian. I'm not here to contest the vote. talk about the vote. Everybody had a chance to say what they needed to say, and the vote was as it was. That being said, during the comment section, I asked the department to report back to us how many times Lakeland was notified prior to the closure of that window. And it was, the window for their reporting was just over a month. Actually, probably 4 weeks exactly, but the number of days was just over a month. They were contacted 6 times. They should have known. They were contacted 6 times. And again, my concern is I'll go all the way back to Dr. Reed, Dr. Bennett, Superintendent Ritz, Dr. McCormick. We set timelines, and we expect timelines to be met. We broke a trust level from school districts across the state because the state knew, people from across the state knew a timeline's a timeline, meet it or face the consequences. And I still want to report that I'm aware of at least 2 other districts who are going to contest missed timelines. And they both said to me, we messed up, we missed it. And I acknowledge that. And they also said timelines don't mean anything now. So I wanted to report that. Add to your comment about dual credit. I'll bring hopefully next month, I couldn't get it because it's fresh, hot on the press, out of the press, of the Rule of 15. It's a study out of Chicago, which reported students who enter college and universities with under 15 hours of dual credit experiences have a 26% chance of graduating from college. 15 or more hours, those students have a 64% chance of graduation. So it shows the value and the importance of dual credit and how dual credit is used appropriately by high school students, the money it saves families as they matriculate through high school into colleges and universities. I hope to have a copy of that next week and maybe I'll just send it to the department to get out to, but I think it's very important. The Higher Learning Commission is still not in favor of making any adjustments. I don't know if they can or cannot. They tell us they can't, but I don't know how hard they've worked either to make changes. So I wanted to report that as well because you brought up the dual credit issue. I have that anecdotally, but I'll get it to you in writing.
Any other board comments? Hearing none, we will move on to general public comments. State Board, do we have comments?
Yes, we do. Megan Poach.
All right, good morning, board members. Okay, since I last spoke in January, you discussed the low passing rates of the core content exams, and you stated then and as well in the NBC investigative story that you would have an update by March, but I have not heard anything. So I chose to come from Lexington again today to get an update on your resolution. So I didn't know if you all had an update on that and could inform me of that now. Or they can talk back right now.
Feel free to make your public comment.
Okay, all right. So we don't have any more time. Schools are interviewing and hiring now for next year, and we're still not eligible. So with this situation, the state of Indiana is in around the teacher shortage. I just can't believe or understand why this isn't a priority. You're forcing us to leave the profession without even being able to start, and it appears that you're okay with that. That's all I have.
Thank you. That is an area that we have been working on, and we will provide an update. That has been high on our radar, and Dr. Syverson and his team have been working diligently upon that, so we will report to that. Thank you for your comments.
Could I recommend that, Megan, right?
Yes.
Maybe one of our staff get your contact information and make sure that there's a direct communication with Megan. So if that's okay. Great, thank you.
And that update's been
today, right?
Yeah, that's
We're
correct.
getting what's been done,
Yeah.
okay.
John O'Neill.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent, members of the board. John O'Neill with the Indiana State Teachers Association. I'm a little confused now on how to phrase this because I was going to speak to you in retrospect and just say that moving forward, I hope that we could have some conversations about these waivers, but it sounds like maybe it's an action item now, I guess. In that case, I would urge the board to vote against these voucher waivers simply because we, ISTA fought this bill 1384, a very contentious bill. We fought this all the way through legislative session simply because we felt that it wasn't a fair protocol for accountability to give these failing voucher schools kind of a pass. And I realize that I've read the memos, I realize that they've improved their grades, but they haven't met the legislative requirements, which previously to this bill that passed less than a month ago was 2 consecutive years of improvement. And we would just say that the Hoosier taxpayers were billed with the idea that if these voucher schools are going to take tax dollars, they're going to do a more efficient job, they're going to cost less, they're going to outperform our public schools. And that just hasn't happened. And we feel that allowing them to continue to get preferential treatment on how many years they can fail and still accept new voucher kids just isn't in the best interest of our students or our tax dollars. And we've got upwards of $170 million now going to voucher schools in the new budget that are basically, there's no track record, and I'd like to see that evidence before we spend more money on that. And whatever the philosophy is or fiscal belief is on this, I know we all differ on that, but I just think that this waiver issue is something that we're very concerned about. This new bill is giving basically a freeway path for these schools. And you as a board decided a couple months ago on Seven Oaks because they weren't ensuring that we had teachers that had the required licensure, and we applauded that decision. And we would just hope that moving forward, whether it's today on this issue or as more schools come, and we all know they'll be coming here every meeting asking for waivers, that you use discretion and make the best decision for kids. And we realize voucher schools are here, but we want to make sure that the ones we have are doing the best for our kids and not failing year after year. And that's really all I have to say on that. And I thought this was a done deal. Now I urge you today to vote against those waivers. But thank you.
Rachel Borelli.
Hi, my name is Rachel Borelli. I'm the Community and Family Engagement Coordinator from Hoosier Academies, and I just wanted to present to you 2 things today. The first is a paper copy of the electronic volume 2 of all of our student stories. We wanted you to have that copy because these stories are so incredible, unique, and heartfelt, and we just felt like it would be great for you to have that. And then also we have our head of schools, our board president, and myself traveled around the state and did town hall meetings. We invited all of our families and students to come to talk about our new consolidated plan. And they were given an opportunity to provide input and ask questions. And this is a representation of their petition to support our school. And so we wanted to present this to you too. I'll just leave both of these outside on the table for you. Thank you.
Ms. Dunlap?
Brian, or Chair, can we, I think some of these public comments are going to be related to a specific issue. I would be more comfortable if we could wait till that as I recuse myself, please. If they weren't signed up that way, I would like for us to shift them that way.
Sure.
If that's possible, please. I do not feel like I should be present for this.
So are there any comments not related at this point to Hoosier Virtual?
That's it, as far as general.
That's all until, okay. Board, are you comfortable if we make that move along? Okay, perfect.
Please do. Thank you.
So best practice innovation and in education, student success. Do we have something to present this month? No? The consent agenda. The approval of the consent agenda for fiscal year 2018 ADM count, the Excellence in Performance Awards, and the approval of the Mount Vernon High School appeal recommendation. And item G, so skipping through to Dr. Ernest's appointment as a chair-elect as the NASBE Board of Directors. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Adjudications, I don't believe there are any this month, correct? Moving on to new business of action. Item A, well, let's go down to, let's have the approval so Dr. Ernest can stay for a bit here. Approval of the Central Christian Academy Request Choice Scholarship. I know Mrs. Wicker asked for that to be removed or moved down to new business of action. Would you like to comment on that?
I asked for it to be moved because this is new legislation and it did pass just in the last couple of weeks, and I thought because it is so new, we have the opportunity to often kind of get feedback on legislation and understand the updates. The public does not always have that opportunity, and it would be nice to have just a quick 1 or 2 minute kind of overview of that legislation so that as we vote on this, the public understands kind of the ramifications of how our vote has been impacted by the new legislation.
Sure.
So if staff could kind of give us that overview, I would appreciate it.
Good morning. As was just noted, we are currently here reviewing new legislation. It was effective upon signature of the governor. The amendment applied to Indiana Code 20-51-4-9, and that particular statute pertains to consequences for choice scholarship schools that receive D's or F's, and I should say consecutive D's or F's. And just a very brief overview of the original law. If a choice scholarship school were to receive 2 D's or F's for the immediately prior or preceding year, the next year, that school would not be allowed to accept any new choice scholarship students. If the school were to receive 3 D or F's, 3 consecutive D or F's, the school would not be able to accept any new choice scholarship students until the school received a C or better for 2 consecutive years. And if a school were to receive 3 F's, 3 consecutive F's, the school would have to receive 3 consecutive C's or better before it could accept new choice scholarship students. The new legislation created a waiver request option for the schools, which is what we're here to talk about today. The legislation states that a school that is able to demonstrate that a majority of students demonstrated academic improvement during the preceding year may request that the board waive the consequences that I just mentioned and begin accepting new choice scholarship students the next school year. Really, it's pretty much that simple, but I welcome any questions.
language says ability. Could you define that?
Ability, in which, are you talking the academic improvement?
In ours, it's fourth line down, placed in the lowest two grade designations for at least 2 consecutive years will have their ability to receive. Does that mean this legislation says we automatically, as a State Board of Ed, have to grant a waiver?
Automatic? No. There's no automatic language in.
So ability means what? Legally, would tell me from the legal, do we have the option of saying, okay, you qualified for reduction or elimination of vouchers? And does that mean because it says ability that we automatically have to grant that? Or do we have the authority to say, no, prove it to us more than 1 year? You've been failing in 3 years, prove it to us more in 1 year. And the second part of the question is, maybe staff can answer, what happens with non-voucher schools who are in the same situation?
Well, answering your second question first, just because it's the simpler question, I believe. This particular statute applies specifically to choice scholarship schools.
Okay, okay, I get it. So go ahead and answer the first question.
So, if I understand your first question, you're asking if the board has discretion on whether or not to grant the waiver?
Discretion is the word I was looking for, yes.
Okay. I do believe that the board has discretion to grant these waivers, and I did forget to mention one other point. These waivers are for 1 year only.
Okay, you said grant these waivers. Do we have the discretion to deny these waivers?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay.
Dr. Freitas.
Tim, did you write these memos for us?
I did.
Because there's no name on here, so I would ask that whoever writes the legal opinion place the name on here so we know who to contact. It's a minor issue. But these 3 schools, do they meet the legality of this particular section?
It's an excellent question. The new legislation simply states that the schools must demonstrate academic improvement with the majority of their students in the preceding year. There is no explanation as to what academic necessarily means. However, with these schools, they went from a combination of D's and F's in the prior 3 years to either an A in the 2015-16 year or a B.
So these schools have made significant academic achievements, at least by virtue of our letter grade system.
As far as category designation, which of course the board is very involved with setting those standards that go into creating those grades, yes, they have made improvement.
So if you look at the law, they've met all the requirements of the law pretty clearly. On what basis would we deny these requests, particularly when we have a legal brief from you saying that we should approve them? On what basis would we deny it?
You know, I hesitate to go too far into that one because that's maybe more of a policy question. But as far as a legal position, I think legally the standard's been met. So I can't offer you a reason to deny it, but that does not mean that the board might not come up with a reason as far as policy.
So if we were to come up with some other reason that we make up that's not statutorily covered, then we're really exceeding our authority, aren't we?
I think that's a reasonable interpretation, yes. I think that's a good answer, or a good way to put it.
I'd like to take issue with that. I mean, I'm sorry. The law says may.
Yes.
So that leaves to this board discretion to determine whether it's in the best interest of Hoosiers to determine whether to grant the waiver or not. And it's up to this board, and it would not be exceeding our authority whatsoever. Now, you can make a case that schools got A's and they deserve the waiver under the legislation, but at the same time, I think it's unfair to suggest that if you take the other opinion that schools should have to demonstrate at least 2 years of C or better grades, that's within our discretion. So I think, to your point, it is a policy decision of this board. I would agree that they have legally met the requirement to enable the board to vote yes to provide the waiver, but that doesn't necessarily mean that on a policy basis, this board is required to or would be exceeding its authority not to grant the waiver.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. That's a very good way to put it, I think.
I mean, we're still, therefore, in the statute, show me the criteria that we are to use to determine whether or not they've met this standard or not.
The criteria, as I stated, the only criteria listed in the statute
Correct.
is that the school must demonstrate that a majority of the students at the school demonstrated academic improvement the preceding year. That is the statutory requirement for granting. But as was previously mentioned, there is discretion contained in the statute as far as that it says may grant.
So they meant that we don't have any regulations, correct, that outline the criteria we will use to make this decision, correct?
That's correct.
So if we really decide not to grant this, then we are just making it up as we go along. There's nothing official.
Well, I don't know if I would use the phrase making it up, but it'd be the board exercising its policy rights.
But then how do we have consistency when other schools come forward? A number of these schools already went from Fs to As.
Yes.
Let's say a school went from F to C. How do we fairly treat all schools equally if we don't have any set criteria? We're just doing it willy-nilly depending on how we're feeling that day. Is that?
I think that's a valid concern, yes. You know, if the board were to go or to consider factors other than in this situation, we've looked at the grades, you know, I think that it's important to consider that it can be difficult to determine when the board should exercise its discretion.
Thank you.
Because there is no past practice. This is a new law.
Yes.
So there is no past practice. So establishing whatever we decide here today, we're establishing practice, correct? If the
Yes.
law is silent to that, we can establish a practice, correct? Whatever decision we make.
Yes, so long as it comports with the law, I think the board can exercise its policy-making authority.
Okay, second question. Okay, use any one of these three schools or just another school. Name the school, School X. Has the same situation as these three schools, and they get a C or better. Congratulations to them. And the following year, they're back to an F or B. What happens with their vouchers? Do they go back to 3 years? The follow-up, I guess the intent of my question is, do they go back to 3 years of below acceptable performance in receiving their vouchers? They have to go through 3 more years of insufficient data reporting, or do they come right back to?
I think I see where you're going, and I think you're asking me how do the various sections of this one statute work together. And did you say 3 Fs and then a C? Is that
Whatever the law says. So if they're D or F, do they go back to needing to get 3 years,
Yeah,
consecutive years, and then they come back before the board, or their vouchers are reduced or eliminated? How's that work?
So as I mentioned before, this waiver is a 1-year waiver. So let's say it's a school with 3 Fs, and they get C, A, whatever, but they request a waiver, it's granted.
C or
Next
above.
year,
Okay.
the next year, well, actually, no matter what, the next year they have to ask for another waiver because they've had 3 Fs, which means under I believe it's Section A of that statute, they have to have 3 consecutive Cs or better before they're out of the consequence portion of the law. Now, the board could continue to grant them, let's say the board granted them 3 years of waivers, they would never experience those consequences. And I feel like, I don't know, am I answering the question you were thinking? Okay, okay.
I'm not getting the answer.
So Central Christian Academy is going to be presented to us, in essence, for the next 3 years for a waiver, even if they get an A the next 3 years.
Well, I believe they received a combination of Ds and Fs in the prior years, so
That's what he's
it's,
saying. That's,
so, I'm sorry, so I believe they received a combination of Ds and Fs in the prior 3 years.
Okay.
Which means that they fall under the portion of the law that says for 2 years, they cannot accept new choice scholarship
Okay.
students. So let's say the waiver was granted for this upcoming year. That means they would have to request a waiver for the following school year as well.
so regardless of the waiver today, they have to come back before us next year.
Yes.
So
No?
if they come back,
Yeah. The waivers are specifically,
C, B, or A, they would not have to come back, correct?
They already have to
It's a
have a
second
waiver.
year, their timeline would reset.
That's reasonable.
Reset, I presume,
Yeah.
because that would be their second.
okay, well, what's the D on that? That's a great term.
And they'd have to come back.
And they come back to the other.
But no, I think if we grant this, their timeline resets today, just like a public school, just like a brick and mortar
So
public
then they have
school.
3 years of.
Because if they
You know,
have
I-
the S and then they get an A, B, or C,
Because that's the
correct me if I'm
question,
wrong,
do they reset?
if a public school has 4 years with that, 3 years with that, and they get an A, their timeline resets over back to year one, correct?
Yeah,
So they could get 3 years once again. So I don't know why this would be different. If we do this today, I think their timeline resets, just like every
yes.
other school.
I misspoke because I was thinking of the 3 Fs and then 3 consecutive Cs or better portion of the law. So we grant a waiver for this school today, and then they get a C or better for their next grade. Then they are back to year one. I apologize, I was confusing 2 parts of the consequence law.
Not very well either, so I get that part.
Okay.
So we grant the waiver today. Next year, they're back to D or F.
Yes.
What happens?
I would think that's year one of their 3 years.
So then they get 3 more years of failing.
No, they only get 2.
So if their next grade,
They get 2.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
They get extended more than
Right.
1 year failing, our students. Okay.
So that they reset.
so if they
But to your
receive,
point earlier, the traditional public school does that on a 4-year cycle.
4 year?
You
That was
you
my
know,
question.
so if you go from so if you're an F year 1, you go to a D year 2, then you're reset. Go back to an F, go to a D, you reset. So we're not doing much for those that keep thinking that we're not treating them the same. We really are. It's still a tougher deal on the voucher school.
so let me try to clarify. So let's say that, obviously we know that this particular school received an A for their last grade. If their next grade were to be a D or an F, that means they have failed to achieve 2 consecutive Cs or better. So they would be back in the consequence phase.
Okay, that's right.
So, I'm sorry.
Because that part didn't change.
When they go back below acceptable.
So what we're doing today does not reset the accountability timeline? But because they have to have the second year, they would
Yes.
have to come back.
They
So the
still need,
accountability timeline would not be reset.
if they are not going to seek, yeah.
Yes, but I was confused about
So
that.
Tim, we wouldn't have this conversation if they weren't worried or anticipating a low grade. Because a high grade would get them out of it anyway, correct? Because they've already had 1 year of a high grade, this would be their second year.
I think that
Is that correct?
I can't speak to what they're anticipating.
But if they did, forget the waiver, if those schools this year got a higher grade, then they are reset, correct?
For their next
Because they've
grade
had
to
2
come out
years.
fall.
I think they couldn't take new students currently.
They can't take new students
For the next school
So
year,
this waiver would
right?
allow them
So
to
this will allow them
accept
to start
new
now
choice
taking
scholarship
new
students for the
For
next school.
sixth, seventh,
Without
eighth.
waiting for the
Until
grade
they
to
go
come
to-
out.
Yeah.
Even though their next grade that they'll get in the fall of 17-18 could take them out of the consequence area, but they will not be able to accept students for that
July,
next school year.
August.
forward. This is obviously very complex, and it's going to get more complex, and so for us to have, whether it's a chart or some sort of information, or even on the documents, to share where they are and what happens next, or what is possible, would be really helpful,
Absolutely.
because, again, this is just going to get more and more complex based upon each school.
So the risk is we waive it, and they potentially do poorly,
D or an F.
correct, and so we have waived that for allowing them to still take students and they're performing poorly, or we could waive it and they do well, we just don't know. They're just wanting to continue to take kids. The risk we're making as a board, or the decision we have to make as a board, is there could be that risk that we waive it and students are going into schools that have dropped again.
Yes, and to the scenario you just described, if they were to do poorly with their next grade, then they would again be in a consequence phase where they could not accept additional choice scholarship students. Unless, of course, they requested a waiver and it was granted. Now, clear as mud, right?
And I want to make sure that for the public, I would never do anything willy-nilly.
Absolutely.
To set a precedent, to try to do anything. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we don't set a precedent that we later come back and regret a precedent, which starts a floodgate of appeals that really are not appropriate. So I want to, all I'm trying to do is make sure we do this and we do it correctly and follow the law. And if the law is silent to this, or is not explicit to it, then whatever we wrote, we're setting a precedent.
Dr.
We
Fraser?
must be careful with setting precedents. It's very difficult then to reverse those once you set those precedents.
Tim, this law is for private schools, right? And is there a similar law for public schools? And if so, what is that particular law? Is there a different time frame? This is a 2-year time frame. Are public schools subject to the same provision, or is it 4 years? So this is a higher standard for the private schools than public schools. And I just wanted to emphasize that the legislature in their wisdom has set a higher standard. And I think it's important just to get that out there in the public that they're being held to a much higher standard with 2 years instead of 4 years.
PJ, did you have a comment?
For me, what this is one, I always want to reward Indiana teachers and students for their success. I mean, when we talked yesterday with the schools that we visited, they're always anticipating opening that envelope up because you spend so much time and you see so much success and personal success on many different levels, but it's not always recognized. And for me, I think, one, when we need to recognize that support, because I think that was the intent of the law, which in our job is to fulfill the intent of that law. But also, I think it's important to realize here that we have every student that would enroll in this school next year, their parents have to make that choice. They're not going to this school because they live on this street. Their parents have to choose to enroll them in that situation, and they have to believe that it was the best situation for their child. And I think when we eliminate that option, we overstep our bounds. So I think it's important to understand that every student that would enroll, if we do grant this waiver, their parent would choose to say, this is the best situation for my child, and this is where I want to send them. So I want us to keep that in mind.
Any other questions, comments?
The comment I would just add, it's really not germane to this law, but it is germane to vouchers. And the fact that every other school, non-voucher school in the state of Indiana that's accredited by the state of Indiana has to account for every penny that crosses their desk and where it's going, how it's going to be spent. Doesn't happen with vouchers. We don't know every penny where that thing is going because there is no, there really isn't a group that comes through and is accountable, State Board of Accounts, that makes sure that those pennies are spent towards the classroom, just like we have to do for all the other public schools. That's my concern. It really goes back to that, but it's really not germane to this law.
Anybody else, Gordon?
First off, I think this is good legislation that the legislature provided to the state board, the ability to evaluate on a case-by-case basis different schools that may fit within an exception and should continue to be receiving choice scholarships. And as BJ said, these parents are making a choice to send their kids to the school that they feel is the best fit for them. I think this year is kind of a special year. I have some concerns about granting the waivers specifically in this year. In particular because we did adjust the 8F model so that in 2015, 2016, it's much more focused on growth. So we don't have that 2-year, grade for the schools. So I just have some concerns that while the schools have done well in terms of getting A's for that 1 year, we don't have that 2-year data to tell us that and inform this board that it's not a one-time blip. So I'm just a little concerned about that, in particular for this year. I think that Dr. Freitas made a very important point as it relates to this new legislation, in that I think that it would be helpful to not only this board, but for the schools and the public to establish some kind of criteria or policy or guidance to the schools of what this board sees as, justification for granting a waiver. I think that would be helpful. Obviously, we couldn't do it in the, couple of weeks since the close of the legislature. Again, I would just say, we are very focused on accountability here at this board, and for this particular 2017 year, I just have some concerns about moving forward with a waiver, just given the fact that we have 1 year of data. Even though they've done well, I just have some concerns about it. So maybe a close call, but I think we have some work to do as it relates to this legislation. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion regarding, do you want to lump them together? We'll just do them individual. Is there a motion regarding the approval for Central Christian Academy request for the choice scholarship waiver?
So moved. Second.
What's the motion?
Move the recommendation. Yeah, approve the recommendation.
All those in favor? Oh, no, we need a roll call, I'm sorry. Roll call, please, sorry.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
No.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No. Next item, approval of the Turning Point School request for the choice scholarship waiver. Do we have a motion?
Move recommendation. Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
No.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No. Approval of the Lutheran South Unity School request for school choice scholarship waiver. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve recommendation.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
No.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Motion's failed.
Next item on the agenda, do we?
Point of order. Did you say the motion failed? It passed.
So you have 6 votes.
By our rules.
We don't have.
Do we need a break, or do you want to keep going?